All right. Hello and welcome. Good morning, good day, everybody. Welcome to IBC, second day here at the Autodesk booth. My name is Alex Horst, and I'd like to show you an overview of the CG and visual effects pipeline made in 3ds Max, where we see a commercial spot as a recent production made by the Paris-based studio called Enki. They did this, well, this shot basically, a lot of live footage, some CG, so we're going to see how that shot was done, how we can analyze that shot in order to track 3D footage into that, and well, and how to get these apes running. Let's have a quick look at the spot first, and then we dive into the actual workflow.
Arrêtez de jouer pour des cacahuètes. Avec Expresso, essayez plutôt d'empocher 10 000 € en 5 minutes sur votre mobile. Exclusivement sur l'application Poker Winamax.
All right. So it's a fun spot. I think the catchphrase is, even though I can't speak French, it's like stop playing for peanuts, play for money. Some behind-the-scenes photographs, just so you see how the shot was done, how the live footage was recorded. Whenever you want or plan to mix CG and real-world footage, you want to make sure that you cover or gather as much information of your environment as possible, such as reflection, that you get a good color management going, a clean backplate where you can do the 3D tracking on, some references. So yeah, they put that guy into different shots just to see how the hair shading would behave, right? And it's really different. In that office shot, they placed some green screens, like portable green screens, behind all these desks in order to get the apes, well, yeah, just sitting behind the desk. And then we can take that footage over into Autodesk Smoke as a starting point, because, well, we are going to work inside of 3ds Max, but we need some reference, some starting point. So to speak, we need the same perspective as our real-world camera inside of 3ds Max. And Smoke has exactly that 3D tracking ability. So, because it's not only an editor, it's a compositor, it's a finishing product, it has that action 3D compositing environment right here, where we can place in an analyzer, which will give you not only a 2D analyzing and stabilizing view or point of view, a starting point, but a real 3D tracking. So it's going to analyze that quick shot, the first shot in the commercial where we have the restaurant going. It's going to create the 3D camera, which can then be exported back over into 3ds Max. And not only that, we can, as soon as the analyzing is done, we can display these tracking points and we can use them as snapping points inside of 3ds Max in order to recreate some part of that environment. Because that's important for us. We want to have some, like the flooring and the walls, we want that in 3D also, to receive the shadows, to receive the reflections, and to put them back onto that live footage. So that's really important. And as you can see here, it's a 3D environment in Autodesk Smoke in that compositor. So as soon as I've done that, I can fine-tune all these tracking points. I can, adjust the quality. I can filter some of these points which are not fitting into what I would like to do. I'm selecting some of these, and I'm going to create locators out of that. That means it's going to store, a vector, a position, basically, for all these 3D points, and making or enabling me to export that as an FBX file. You can also work the other way around. Because we have all these 3D positions going in our live footage, we can quickly sketch up or plug out a character inside of 3ds Max, export that as Alembic data or FBX, and import it in Smoke. Use these points as axis controllers in order to, well, get the 3D footage into position and do a quick previs out of that. So here I'm just exporting that as an FBX, and then I'm going to hop over into 3ds Max and do the import process. So I have, well, right now it's an empty scene, but I have that FBX which I like to import right now. I've exported that earlier on. I've not only exported the camera, but also bear in mind there are some tracking points which I'm going to use as a reference for our 3D environment. So here I have the camera. It has, most importantly, the animation of our real-world camera going. So it should have the same lens, the same kind of, well, lens distortion also, and that animation. And we have all these 3D locators in space. So we can use these as a reference to draw out or to sketch up our 3D environment. So I'm going to create a line linked to these dummies. I'm just doing a super quick and dirty job to recreate that environment here. It's also very interesting that we have that Autodesk Recap technology, which is a 3D scanning application based on photogrammetry. So that means you can attach a GoPro to your quadcopter, to your drone, fly around in your set, and have a ready-to-go, 3D environment out of that, which is a great starting point for doing stuff like that, doing modeling out of your 3D set. So I'm just sketching out these walls. I'm going to make them slightly transparent, go back into my camera and check if that fits onto that live footage or not. So I'm going to place that in the background. And that's almost good. I think we had 2 frames off here, so I would need to adjust that in the background footage inside of 3ds Max. But overall, this is the shape we need. And we can take that further. We can create that bench over here. We can create these columns, which will function as some sort of an occluder. So if we have a character who is going to walk back in that restaurant, it will automatically mask out that portion of the 3D character based on the 3D elements in our scene. So this will be like a second stage to that. We have all the 3D objects in here. So now we can add real CG footage. That's not only the character, but we also remember that restaurant scene, which was empty more or less, for the backplate footage. We want to add the tables, we want to add the chairs, so we want to dress up the scene, populate it, do some additional interior design. And this has never been easier than right now in 3ds Max 2015. So because we have a so-called select and place functionality, which has been developed in cooperation with IKEA. So they just announced that they produce, I think 75% of their recent furniture catalog is CG. It's all produced in 3ds Max, and they can just, drag and drop assets into your scene. It's automatically going to get aligned to the surface. See that? So I can place it up here, I can place it on the wall, wherever I want to go. I'm not losing any momentum when it goes down to, designing or populating your scene, detailing up your scene. So I'm just adding a few chairs like that. Can rotate those around quickly. Oh, all right, and we can go really crazy with that. I don't know if that makes sense, but we can certainly add animated features. It's fun to play around with. Just make sure that you have some assets going. Either you model those yourself or you download them from 3D libraries like TurboSquid or Evermotion. There are plenty of those online. You can check the camera once again if that footage is all right. If not, then we can go in here and maybe, tweak some of these positions. If you are into modeling that stuff, then we added a great modeling functionality with the subscription top, the extension one for our 3ds Max 2015 subscription customers. And this is the OpenSubDiv modeling, developed, introduced by Pixar. So it has been used in, I would say almost all of their movies. It reaches back. The technology reaches back to Toy Story. It has been crucial and essential in the production of WALL-E, in the production of Monster Academy. And it's a very smart smoothing process. So let's say there are no edges in real world that are actually 90 degrees sharp. You will not find those. So whatever you want to do, what do you want to do if you want to do a CG movie or if you want to render CG? You want to chamfer all these edges. So that means you're going to add additional geometry in order to achieve some sort of shading like that, some round corners. See, that also makes the object heavier. So in that case, we have 3,000 500 polygons in that scene over here, or in that box over here. This one, where we don't have any smooth corners at all, has 16 polygons. So that's a huge difference. However, again, we don't have the detail for the curvature, for the chamfering. If we want to use OpenSubDiv for that, it's very easy to add that detail and to stay in touch with the, well, artistic control. So if the art director comes in and says, I want to have a different smoothing, then the artist can actually change that. He doesn't need to go back into the topology and delete some edges and so on. So right now, we have more like a bowl. It doesn't look any more like this box, but this is on purpose. We didn't give 3ds Max the information it needs in order to do that kind of chamfering effect. So what I can do in that modifier stack over there, it's all non-destructive. You can go back to your base mesh, which I've done just here. I've selected all these edges, and I'm just going to adjust the crease amount for that. See, so now I have individual live feedback on what I'm actually doing. So I can do that with the art director sitting next to me, and he says, okay, that looks good, that looks bad. And the base mesh will still have these 16 polygons, not 3,000, not 300,000. It's still a very easy to handle ground mesh. You can also use some sort of crease set modifier where you can actually store different settings for all these edges. You can animate those. So it's even from an, well, animation perspective, it's a very interesting feature. We have GPU enhancement, GPU caching for the OpenSubDivision modeling modifier. So if you want to use that on top of a character, you can do that with that feature. And it's great for hard surface modeling, whether it's for, I don't know, Fast and Furious, or your CG car, or your Star Wars movie, or Transformers, wherever you have these basically hard edges which need to be designed. OpenSubDivision modeling is the great enhancement here. And this is just my last tip, by the way. We have the same functionality inside of Maya, so now you can transfer these models back and forth between Max and Maya without losing any edge information. It's fully compatible, it's getting transferred via FBX, so that's really great. Let's have a look at some more features. How did they create these apes for that specific commercial here? So there's a lot of effort being spent into the animation process as well as in the CG design. They searched for a lot of references for these apes. So you can do that on Google Images, but they needed to actually study how these apes would behave if they had an iPad or a mobile phone in their hands. So they made a field trip to the zoo, which is not the worst thing to do. So they took a lot of footage, took a lot of photos, a lot of photographs, put some of these cardboard iPads basically into their hands, looked how that behaves, and this gave them a great starting point, not only for the animation, but also for the design of the fur, of the hair later on, as well as some texture references. So they also took pictures of the hands, of the feet, and put that onto the model later on. Cool, so these are the CG apes. Let's hop into 3ds Max once again and see how we can add all that model detail to these 3D models. Cool, so this is a very basic scene right here. So I just wanted to talk you through the process of the character creation for that commercial. We have a generic base mesh, basically. This doesn't have any further characteristics, no details in its face, but this has been used for all the animations. And the details, the material, as well as the hair simulation, gets put on that afterwards. So in order to create our displacement, to create our details, we can use our texturing and sculpting tool Mapbox. And you can just, send an object over into Mapbox, into Maya, with a single-click interop. You go on the files, send to, and then it sends that selection over into the other DCC tool. And it also, if I go there, it also creates a live connection. So you can barely see it here at the projector, but here it says connected to 3ds Max. That means it's a bidirectional connection right now. If you change something in Mapbox, you can update that back into Max. And even from Max, if you say, oh, I changed some mapping coordinates or something, you can send that back into Mapbox. So here's our ape model right here. Again, I wanted to add texture, and I wanted to add additional geometry detail. Both can be done in Mapbox. And I would say, just to introduce you to that process here, it's a super easy to learn and artistic tool. So for all the people here who might not have been in touch with 3D, Mapbox is the way to start. If you have like a 3D scan of an object and you want to detail that up, Mapbox is super easy to learn. My daughter uses that at home, so it's brilliant. You have all your tools here, sculpting, paint tools, those getting combined with a stamp or a stencil, and it's a non-destructive way of working because it's all layer-based. So I'm going to create a layer right here. It's like a Photoshop workflow, more or less. So I'm creating a sculpting layer because that's what I want to do. I want to add additional geometry detail right now. I have my sculpting brush selected already. I'm going into a mirror mode for that. And then I can actually come in here and I can say, okay, I want to add additional details to the eyebrows, maybe move that over here, add some details around the mouth area. There we go. And we get all the structure we need with some time, you know, and some love for that effect shot. You can do that step by step. You know, build up your 3D model. You can also take image references, which we took at the zoo, and we convert them into grayscale images. So here I have my image browser with some photographs. Well, that's not an ape photograph. It's a photo of an eye area. I think it's an old woman they used right here. So I can use that as a stencil for us. And this is a sculpting reference for my sculpt brush right here. So I can adjust that texture to fit roughly around that eye area, going back into my sculpt brush, adjusting the strength, dialing that down a little bit, because I don't want to have too much of detail there. And then I can, you know, just quickly sculpt in the detail based on that photograph. Cool. So you see, we're getting there. The thing is, this has all been sculpted on one layer. And we are not generating just one ape, we're generating, I think, 10 different variations. So because it's layer-based, we can quickly iterate on different variations like this. You know, it's like an opacity control for our sculpting layer, and we can add multiple of these, blend them together, subtract, we can go into a negative value for that, and then we can obviously also add textures to it. And as soon as the texture is added, it's getting more and more believable for our environment right here. So I'm going to switch into my paint tools. I'm planning on using a texture projection. That means I have some source textures like a leather texture right here, if I can use that. I'm going to use all the tiles, and I'm going to project that color as a base coloring, basically, for my layer in a moment. So I'm going to flood that with some fall-off angle. Flood that from camera if I can, just from that direction, see what I'm doing, and maybe from up front. If there are some details missing, then I can still come in here and paint that details, rub those in. It's really easy as that. It's very straightforward. So, well, it's quite dark skin right now, so I'm adding in another texture layer on top. Here I have a photograph of an actual ape, which has been edited or pre-edited in Photoshop. And I can quickly line that up onto my character right here. And as soon as that's done, I'm going back into my projection, and I'm going to transport, wrap in all these texture details onto that character. Wow. So that's a fun approach to work. I'm going to disable my fall off right here. And I might even disable the mirroring. But you get the idea. It's really straightforward, very artistic driven. Because we are working in a real 3D environment, the brush actually recognizes the 3D model as it is and can fit into small, well, details of the skin, actually. And you can paint it over. You can use a dry brush to just paint the overhangs of a model, whatever you prefer. And then it's very beautiful because you can not only paint the diffuse color slot, you can paint the specularity, you can paint bump maps, you can even tweak your normal maps if you like. So I'm going to add one more thing here, just a normal sculpt paintbrush right here. I'm going to paint some skin details in. Cool, right? But that's not looking too good. So what Mapbox supplies you with are all the blend modes which you are familiar inside of Photoshop. You can even export a Photoshop file out of that and do some additional tweaks in Photoshop, import it back into Mapbox. So again, it's a full-blown texture painting tool, very, very straightforward. As soon as that's done, you can export that back over into 3ds Max. I'm going to show you one of the final Ape models in a second, which, well, I've prepared that inside of Mapbox right here. And this gives you the ability not only to, well, get over the, there we go, send over the sculpting details or the texture details, but you can also export sculpting details by printing that on a displacement map. If that makes sense, I don't know. So I'm going to show you. We can actually export or generate a normal map or displacement map or vector displacement map out of that detail, that model detail. So this is exactly what we've done inside of 3ds Max. Remember, we have only that base mesh. But at render time, V-Ray or Mentoray, whatever renderer you prefer, they use V-Ray in that case for that specific project, you can use that displacement map at render time, and it's going to add these additional tessellation, these polygons, in the renderer. So you don't slow down your viewport at all, and you can still animate with a base mesh, with a generic base mesh for your, with your model. So let's hop over into 3ds Max once again, because I would like to show you the actual shader tree, the material for that ape. For those people who just stopped by, this is the commercial we're talking about. We have apes passed on or introduced into live footage with some hair simulation. We're just in between where we've generated the texture maps and displacements for that. And I wanted to introduce you to the workflow there for the material. Enki, the studio who did that, they painted 7 textures per ape to get a very high detailed resolution. So we have like a bitmap for the hands, for the feet, for the hat only. And this all gets composited in one of these composite nodes. So I would say this is like one ape right there. But if I scroll down, we have another composite link with another ape, another ape. It's a total of 8 different variations, I think, roughly. There it goes. And they also painted the subsurface scattering, so for the skin to make it more believable. And this all blends over into V-Ray multi-materials. We have some color correction nodes in between. So you see what I'm getting. It's getting more and more complicated. But as soon as you break it down into the first steps, it's not that complicated at all. It just looks like super, super complex right here. But this is the material for all the apes at once. So they can decide, okay, this is ape number 1. I want to just change the material ID, and it's going to do the magic for you without manually having to assign different material types. So the downside of that is that we don't have actual real-time reference in the viewport. So that makes art direction quite complicated. The animators don't care, but as soon as it goes for the visual style, you want to have maybe an ape with gray hair up front, one with dark hair in the back, and so on. You want really to be able to decide how the composition should look like. There's an easy way to work around that, especially inside of 3ds Max 2015. We've added Shader FX, and this is a great tool for adding GPU or for creating GPU-based shaders. So they are running in real time in your viewport. As soon as I get that running, they run in real time in your viewport, and it's a great tool for look finding, so to speak. It's not only for those apes, but you can do all sorts of crazy stuff with it. I think I have a teapot in the background. There we go. There's no 3ds Max demo without a teapot, is there? I don't know. So this is the DirectX material, which you were able to generate in previous versions of 3ds Max. What's new to that is the ability to activate the Shade FX control. And I'm going to assign that material to my ape over here. I'm going to, switch to that overview. Very good. As soon as I open up Shade FX, you get a new node editor, a visual interface to design your own graphic shaders. So with the extension top of 3ds Max 2015, it's all getting or it's all gotten a little bit easier because you can filter all the texture nodes and GPU nodes that are available right here. So I can quickly filter for a texture. So let's say I want to add a normal map later on, that's for sure. And I also want to add a texture map in another UV set. And I'm going to load in, let's say, a diffuse map for that. So what I'm trying to achieve is a real-time feedback for my diffuse map, but not only that, I want to be able to blend between different diffuse map channels. So I have one diffuse map there, I'm going to load in another one in a second, just like that. And you can add in as many as you want, just making, you know, the overall graph a little bit more complicated. So in that case, I'm going to blend between those two textures, those two color informations, basically. There we go. Adding a float value for controlling that. So it's basically just a value between 0 and 1, blending between those two textures. I'm passing that color back into my shader. As soon as I've done that, I'm getting the feedback on my model over there. And then I can do additional tweaks, like the color, the specularity. I want to control that. I'm going to wire that in. I wanted to have a normal map. The normal map is going to display the displacement details onto my model in real time in the viewport without adding additional tessellation. So it's not going to slow down my overall performance right here. So now I have, well, a pretty good starting point as a reference, as a visual reference. It certainly looks better than just an orange ape without any texture information. So again, art direction makes the life of art direction a lot easier to have control with the shader inside of the viewport. Well, on the other hand, an art director doesn't want to dive into these kind of, you know, shader trees. What you can do as a texture artist, you can expose certain values. So you can say, I want to be able to control the blend, so I'm going to expose that in my material editor, and I'm going to expose the specularity as a color filter in my material. And if I go back into the material editor, now we have access to the blend mode right here. So see that, now I'm able to blend between these. I'm able to adjust the specularity quite easily, just as that. And if we have a look at the later version of that shader, it will look something like that, where we are also able to blend between normal maps, for example. So around the mouth area, we have different details, different versions of that displacement map going, and we can easily preview that. I can blend between different color variations. And again, I can use that and use these values, wire that back into my V-Ray material, and use that at render time. Because this is nothing you want to use in rendering. We want to use subsurface scattering, all sorts of crazy stuff in the material shader tree later on for the calculation. But it's a great starting point, give you interactive feedback on that. Cool. So next will be creating the hair, all right? So because let's be honest, this is a little bit awkward. These are naked apes running around right now, so it's a bit, yeah, it's a bit weird. Hair simulation, pretty important, especially for that spot. We have apes running through Paris, so yeah, you wanted to have hair simulation on top of that. There's an inbuilt hair simulation tool inside of 3ds Max which you could use. They haven't used it, so to speak, and this is a great strength of 3ds Max. Whenever you want to really dive in on a certain feature and you want to extend the functionality of 3ds Max, there's a 95%, there's a very high chance, it's 95% chance, I could say, that you find a free script on scriptspot.com, that you find a plugin or a commercial third-party plugin, and this is exactly what they did. They said, okay, we want to do this high-profile commercial with a lot of hair simulation, so we're going to invest in a third-party commercial plugin, which is called Hair Farm, which gives you sophisticated hair simulation and styling tools inside of 3ds Max. So I'm going to give you just a brief overview because the basics are all the same, whether you use XGen, which you're going to see after my presentation in 10 minutes, or if we're using the inbuilt Max system. Hair Farm, however, gives you quite good control directly inside of 3ds Max for all of that. So I'm going to spawn another object, which I would like to use as a root object to generate my hair on. I'm going to quickly align that up on that ape right here. And I'm going to use the hair farm brush modifier to control the initial state, the initial direction of my hair. Looks interesting, looks like that. You have a better reference if you show the direction colors, and then you go in with a traditional brush, and you can, style that hair, move that a bit down right here. Or if you want to make your life easier, you can turn on gravity, and do some initial directions for your hair like this. There are a lot of more functionalities to that, but I want to quickly generate some hair so we can render it later on. In our shot, a hair farm has also the hair simulation modifier, so you can cache out a hair simulation with all the collisions based on the character's animation, and you can use that on your render farm later on. And this is the reference for our hair right now. I'm going to increase the hair count. But not only that, I'm also going to increase the hair count that is actually displayed in our viewport. So based on the graphic board, whatever graphic card you have in there, you can really go crazy with that. So I would like to introduce you to Bigfoot, my good friend, the Yeti. There's no ape anymore. We have a lot of hair going on. So now we can go into trimming and adjusting the thickness and going into hairstyling. You can do that manually. Or remember, we had this great texturing toolset, Mapbox, which we just reached out for 10 minutes ago. So this is where we added all the sculpting details and texturing. We can use exactly that same toolset in order to create density maps for our hair. So let me just adjust that. There we go. So here I have certain or different layers for the density, for the colorization of my hair, for my material, frizziness, length, control, and so on. And we can use these grayscale textures to, wire that back into our hair farm modifier. So I have kind of prepared that, set it up inside of my material editor. So here I have 3 textures as an example, and I can just drag and drop maybe the length operator, wire that into the length values over there, and that trims it down quite nicely, just like that. I can do the same for my density. There we go, and it's all coming together more or less. I'm going to quickly, there we go. I'm going to quickly adjust the edges. I don't need those. Perfect. All right, and then you can go even further with styling your hair. I have the final hair right here, just to give you an impression of what you can actually do. There we go. So there are a lot of details in here. There are some details around the ears, eyebrows, on the eyes itself, even within the nose. We have all sorts of different hairs. It all behaves differently. So if I go back in here, you see a quick breakdown of what I was talking about. You can use maps to control your hairstyling, or you can even control it by generating 3D geometry. So in that case, we have some additional geometry around the eyes, on the fingers, and this all lines up nicely with these, styling modifiers. All right, we have the maps generated in Mapbox, and this all drives the actual hair. Cool. So let's take a little step back, because that was just the CG process, how to generate the graphical appearance of these apes. We didn't dive into animation yet. So, and this is a quite interesting topic, animation, character animation inside of 3ds Max, because we have several packages which we can use inside of Max. Basically, we are talking about 3 core packages. One is the Character Studio. This is the one over here. Hello. It's our lightweight bipedal character rig, which has native support for motion capturing, so you can use that right off the box. You can use the character. It's basically the same thing, right? You can create the character animation toolkit. It's very, very easy to set up because you have these stretchy bones. You can quickly align that based on your geometry, and it also, as soon as you have generated that, you can go in and have some procedural walk cycle generated for you. So that's procedural, so you can use it as a starting point for your run, for your walk animation, and go on with that. A lot of people use the character animation toolkit because of its flexibility. It has connection to Motion Builder, so if you want to put on motion capturing data on top of that, you're free to do so. It's not limited to bipedal. You can do, 1,000 legs if you want. That's really up to you. Not fitting for the ape though. And yeah, and you can build your custom rig on top of that. So a muscle system, a facial animation system, you can use the character animation toolkit for that. If you want even more control, you can build a full custom rig on your own. So this is what the studio in Paris, Enki, did for that commercial. They built their own bone and rig system just like that, where they have, again, full control over what they are doing. All these different controllers have additional custom attributes over here, which enables them to save different poses, to copy a state from the left hand over to the right hand side, and do animation with that. And it also has a facial animation system in there. So if I, just unhide that, like this, here you have control over the ape's shape, facial shape. So you can animate that. Okay, very good. And so we have some facial animation on top of that. Very good. So as soon as the rig is generated, the animators can start their work and really animate like crazy. Do a lot of great stuff, like this final scene right here. If I can open it. So here we have one of the final shots in the office. Where we have all the apes with the high density meshes, and they are doing their stuff. So that means as soon as that's animated, they are caching that by using point cache, or now in 3ds Max 2015 extension 1, you have Alembic support, so you can use that as a transformation method to take over all your animations, put that into Smoke, put that into Flame. You can send it over into Maya, back and forth. It's a really nice connection right there. But then again, now we have the animation. We don't have any details on these apes, but we put so much effort into generating the hair, so much effort into generating the displacement and the texture. So what do we do? Well, it's easy, because actually there are a lot of scripting functionalities inside of 3ds Max. We have MaxScript, we ship with the SDK, and now in 3ds Max 2015, you have Python support also. So what Enki did, they used MaxScript in order to just, pick one of the animated apes, choose from one of these variations, a hairstyle, a texture style, and a displacement style. So they just say, okay, I want to have displacement 1 and texture style number 2. And this loads in all these settings from an external Max file onto the animated ape. And you're good to go, right? So again, this gives you full control in that animation pipeline. You can animate everything you want, and if you want to change an ape to a different version later on, you can do that with a single click. Cool. So let's wrap that up. I'm going to go back into the initial scene where we had that restaurant going right here. So I've been using Alembic right here to cache all these apes, and the beauty about that is that these Alembic files, they can be used as a normal 3ds Max file. You can use apply your V-Ray textures on top, your Mentor Ray shaders. You can smooth that. You can apply different UV groups and so on. So it's really a very flexible file format. There's one tiny detail here, because that ape up front, which I've just selected, he's very excited because of this great game he's playing, right? So he's punching on the table. And all the props on that table, they are already animated. But let's say, okay, this is kind of a tedious work to really get in and animate all of these props on that table. There's a very easy way to solve that. Basically, all you need to do is apply a Mass Effects modifier, and the Mass Effects gives all these objects a physical density, a mass basically. And as soon as we hit play, it's a bit slow down because it's calculating all the ape simulation right now. But basically, as soon as the table jumps, it will also let all these props jump automatically. You can key that down, so you have it in your time frame and in your timeline, and then you can select these props and do whatever you want with that. So let's do one more thing, and this is a nice approach. I've selected these props. I'm going to send them over into Maya with a single click. Remember, we have this single click interop workflow. inside of Maya, I've prepared something, and Roland, my colleague, is going to show you how this is set up in a second. So it's all like pre-cooked right now. I'm going to go into my Fong shader and add a bit of transparency to that coffee mug, because what we've done, we've added a bit of a fluid system, so a Bifrost simulation. Just filled some coffee in that coffee mug and make it spill over as soon as that coffee mug gets animated. Whoop. It's easy as that. And because of the extension in 3ds Max 2015, where we've added Alembic, I can just underline that one more time. We can now mesh up this Bifrost animation, generate geometry, export it as an Alembic file out of Maya, and import it back into 3ds Max with just the import functionality right here. So let's do that. Cool. And that's the pipeline, basically. If you want to fit that back into your compositor, into Smoke, for example, whoop, there's our blue coffee. Nice. Brilliant. Very good. Well, if you want to wire that back into your live footage, which was the initial intention, then you want to make sure that you're using render elements. So we were breaking down all these beauty passes into having a Z-depth, into having reflection, a diffuse color slot, and you want to export or render that as an HDR format, so like OpenEXR, where you have the full bit depth in order to control your colors, your color grading, and all of that. Inside of Smoke, you can quickly transfer all these layers into our compositing environment, Connect FX, which gives you, all these operators here to do not only CG stuff, but to really blend in your live shots with the CG environment. It has action in there, the 3D compositing environment, which we initially use to track that scene, to get that camera over into 3ds Max. And then we added these CG elements, we did the animation. This all gets, again, rendered in these different passes with the hair applied. It's getting comped with the backplate, lighting, comping, we're adding reflections, we're adding color grading, and we end up with the final spot. So I'm going to hand it over in a minute to my colleague Roland, who is going to show you how to set up this Bifrost fluid simulation. I just wanted to give you one more information on the way. We have this desktop subscription going, and this is very important, especially for studios like this. We had a 3-month production time for that commercial, and in between there are different peaks where you have 5 different animators coming into your studio on top of your operators. So you can hire just rent 3D Studio Max or an entertainment creation suite for a certain time. I want to thank Enki, who provided us with all that content. If you need more information, please go to the front desk. Let us scan your badge. We can contact you individually or grab. I think I'm here right next to the booth for the next 50 minutes. If you want to have a chat, please do so. I'm going to play out the commercial one more time so you see what it was all about. And then we're going to hand it over to Roland. Thank you very much. Have a great IBC, everyone. Cool.
Arrêtez de jouer pour des cacahuètes. Avec Expresso, essayez plutôt d'empocher 10 000 € en 5 minutes sur votre mobile. Exclusivement sur l'application Poker Winamax.